Okay, I'm going to talk you through my wafter rig or bottom bait rig. You're going to need some coated braid. I like the quarter end trap semi-stiff in £30. You're going to need some wide gape hooks. I like the size 4s, again by quarter. And you're going to need some shrink tubing, also some silicone tubing. So to start with, you're going to take 12 inches of your coated braid. Okay, we're going to tie a rig of about 5 to 6 inches. So I'm going to take 12 inches off. Okay, it's going to be all coiled up, so just try and straighten it out a little bit between your hands. Okay, we're then going to peel back 5 inches to 5.5 inches of the coating. I do this with my teeth. Okay, so we're going to peel that back, and then we're going to tie our figure of 8 loop in the end. So I'm going to mount a 14mm bait on this rig, 14mm wafter. So I want a loop that is smaller than the bait. There's nothing worse than having a rig where the knot is hanging out the bottom of the bait. It just doesn't look very neat. Okay, so I'm going to tie a nice small knot in there, a little figure of 8 loop, and I'm just going to put an old bait needle through there and just tighten that up. Okay, you want to waste as little back braid as possible. It's a little bit fiddly, that bit. Okay, and I've just trimmed the tag end off there, so you've got a nice neat loop. Okay, the next thing you want to do is put your bait on there. So you shouldn't really tie a rig up where you're mounting a bait on a hair without putting the bait on first. I think it's really important that you get the length of the hair just right for the bait, the size of hook you're using, the fishing situation that you're tying your rig up for. So I'm going to put the bait on and then put my hair stop in. There we go. Okay, so that's the bait mounted on the hair. So you can see the uncoated braid and the coated braid. So the next bit, you're going to need your silicone tubing. Okay, so a little bit of silicone tubing. We're going to use about 5mm. Okay, so we're just going to snip 5mm off, and we're going to push that onto the end, the opposite end to the bait, where the coating braid is. So you can use a rig ring here. I always prefer silicone tubing. One, because I think a rig ring can be a little bit cluttered, like can clutter your rig up a little bit, not all the time, and it's a little bit of added extra weight. But the main reason I use silicone tubing is because I like to be able to tell what's been going on in the lake. Silicone tubing, if you get picked up and done, will slide back down to the eye of the hook. If you notice, every fish you catch, by the time you get your rig in, that silicone's right down at the bottom. If you do ever get done when you wound in, that silicone's right at the bottom. If you wind back in and it's where it was when you cast it out, you're pretty confident that you haven't been picked up. Okay, so the next bit is to put your hook on. So a nice big size 4 wide gape. So we're going to thread this through the silicone tubing. It's important to note, don't thread the silicone tubing all the way down to the coated braid. Okay, not until the hook's on, because when you try and push this hook through, you might catch the coated braid as you're pushing it through with the sharp point. Okay, so let's just show you that. So I'm just pushing that hook through there. You can see it's still on the coated braid. Okay, so I'm going to push that tubing all the way around, roughly opposite the barb. Once we're in that position there, I'm going to pull the braid all the way through. Okay, so we're now in a position where both the tubing and the hook are on the uncoated braid down near the bait. So I'm going to leave a gap of around, I don't know, 5 to 10mm maybe between the bait and the hook. I like a little bit of separation. I think it gives you better hooking properties. This rig I'm tying up for fishing over bait, so the rig's going to be quite short itself, so I don't want a huge gap. If I was fishing maybe just boilie only, I might have a bigger gap between the boilie and the bait and the hook, sorry. If I was fishing in a solid bag, it might be touching the shank of the hook, so it all depends. But for this one, I'm just going to have a gap of around 10mm, just for fishing over bait, bits of particle, chopped boilie and that kind of stuff on a shortish rig. Okay, so once you've found out how long you want your hair, we're just going to tie the knotless knot. Okay, so I'm not too fussy about how many times I go round. Obviously you don't want it to be too many, you don't want it to be too little, so I'd say anything between probably like 5 and 10. The most important thing I'm looking for is about an inch of uncoated braid coming out the back of the eye. Okay, so if I've stripped off a little bit too much, I'll do a couple of extra whips round. If I've not pulled off quite enough, I would go down as little as sort of 5 or 6 wraps around the hook. Okay, so you can see there that the hook is not just knotted on. Okay, and there's about an inch of uncoated braid out the back of the eye. So I'm quite particular. I like to make sure that although the shrink tubing is trapping the hair in place, making sure it's coming off the hook at the right place, I like to make sure that the hair is running directly up the centre of the back of the shank and it's not coming off to one side. Okay, that way you know it's as neat as it possibly can be. Okay, so the next bit, we're going to put some shrink tubing on. So I like about 1.5 centimetres. Okay, I've used all sorts. I've used really long kickers, really short kickers, no kickers, and I always seem to go back to around 1.5 centimetres to 2 centimetres. I use the medium shrink tube, again from Corda. Find it fits over the size 4s quite nicely. Okay, you just have to just gently tease it on. Okay, I find with the larger one it doesn't shrink down quite as small. This medium one goes down nice and small once put over the kettle. Okay, so we've now got the boilie, the silicone tubing, the hook and the shrink tubing, and you can still see there's a centimetre, maybe 2 centimetres of uncoated braid coming out the back of the shrink tubing. Okay, once you've done that, we're going to tie our figure of 8 loop knot in the end of the rig. So I'm going to make this one 6 inches. So I'm just going to measure out 6 inches. And I'm just going to form a figure of 8 loop knot in the end. Okay. So I don't want this loop knot to be too small. Okay, I put all my rigs onto quick links, so I want to make sure that it's usable and it's not too fiddly. Okay, so I've just made that figure of 8 loop knot there, but I haven't tightened it down. I've just pinched it ever so slightly. Okay, I'm going to wet that up, and then I'm just going to tighten it up. Okay, so don't pull down too tight at this point. If you pull down too tightly, you can break the coating in the braid. Okay, so the time to pull down even tighter than that is once you've steamed it. Okay, and it'll all take shape perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to trim that tag end off. I'm not going too short. I'm going to leave sort of 5 or 6 mil on that tag end. When you do steam it, it can tighten even more and pull through. So if you cut it really short at this point, you can end up with no tag end once you've steamed it. Okay, so that's your finished rig just before we steam it. So I'd use this rig anything from short to medium range really. I like to use a foam nugget with it, or maybe even a PVA bag, just because of the suppleness of the hair. I wouldn't be overly confident casting that out repeatedly without anything protecting it from tangles. Okay, so if I was fishing anything from 1 to or 2 to 3 rods on a spot, I'd use maybe a little bit of foam. If I was fishing just a rod on its own and it was short to medium range, I might put a bag on it. Okay, but that's the rig I would use. I'm just going to go and steam it, and I'll show you the finished rig. Okay, so here's the rig that we've just made. So I like to steam my rigs in like a saucepan of water or a kettle with the lid off if you're out on the bank. I don't like holding them over just like the spout. Okay, so once you've got a little bit of water boiling there, what I'm going to do is drop the hook end in and just shape that shrink tubing. Okay, so just like a little bit of a kicker there. Okay, so I don't want it coming off at too acute angle that you're completely closing the gape up. Okay, and once you've done that end, I'm just going to drop the other end in, make sure it's fully submerged, and then just tighten it up. Okay, once you've done that, I can just turn that water off and move that out of the way. Okay, there you can see the finished rig. So the coated braid section's nice and straight after it's been steamed. You can always re-steam it in a fishing situation if it gets kinked out in the lake. You can see the separation between the bait and the hook. Nice big size 4 hook. That little 14mm Wafter will sit just off the bottom, not too high. Okay, and that little kicker there with the shrink tubing, just extending the hook slightly. Found that always helps with a better hook hold. Okay, so you can see there I've got a helicopter set up, tied up. That's all ready to go. So we've got the Corda helicopter system on there with one of the thinking angler's beads and a little quick change system. So I put a little sleeve on the end of that rig, and then I can pop it on and off nice and easy, you know, when I'm checking the spot or changing the rig, caught a fish or whatever. So yeah, I'd use this rig for silt predominantly, short to medium range. I'd fish it on a clean gravel bottom as well. Probably wouldn't fish it in weed, depending on how heavy it was. But yeah, predominantly I use this rig on clean and soft silt with a helicopter system, just so that rig can fly up and sit over whatever's out there. If I wanted to fish further out, the reason why I use this rig at short to medium range is because I always like to put a nugget on it or a PVA bag. If I want to fish further out, so say I'm fishing down Oxford and want to put 3 rods on a spot, you know, 80, 100, 120 yards, whatever it might be, then I'd go to an IQD rig, so with a much stiffer material, just so I can take tangles out of it completely, and again fishing that on a clean bottom. If I had the choice, I'd always use this one, but range can determine, obviously range and weather conditions can determine whether you want to be using a nugget on there or not. But yeah, given the chance, fishing at sort of anything from close range up to 70 yards or so, I'd fish this with a little nugget over bait. I'd fish it over a spread of boilies, or I'd fish it over a spotted area with particles and chopped boilie. Yeah, it's always done me really good. So I've tried loads of different rigs for fishing on the bottom, wafters, and this is the one that I tend to come back to all the time. So yeah, give it a go. You can change the components, use slightly different coated braids or your favourite pattern of hook, but if you stick to that rig as closely as you can, you won't go too far wrong. Okay, cheers.